This event is part funded by the EU Create Europe programme under the Walking Arts and Local Communities. So a big thank you to the EU for that. Right, next up, I'm going to introduce you to our host, and that's Clare Qualmann. And Clare is an artist researcher whose work focuses on participatory, site-specific and experimental modes of contemporary creative practice. She's a founding member of the Walking Arts Network and has led the AHRC-funded project 2012 to 15 to extend its interdisciplinary connections with others using walking as a creative, critical practice internationally. Ongoing projects include Perambulator, a walking project with prams, and East End Jam, a walking, foraging, and preserving project that celebrates the unexpected fruitfulness of the urban environment. With Professor Clare Hind, they have co-edited 2 volumes of Wander Scores, Ways to Wander and Ways to Wander the Gallery, both published by Triarchy Press. Her teaching, research and art practice explore the interconnections between art, activism, and the radical potentials of participation. Clare, thanks so much for taking on the host's baton, and we turn to you to run the event.
Thanks so much, Andrew. What a pleasure to be invited. And in fact, the moment that I saw you had published a Talking Walking podcast with Eléonore, I immediately kind of pinned it in my email inbox as a kind of must listen, and also thought I really need to get in touch with Eléonore because, as you know, it's an area of research that I've got a really strong connection to. My own walking art practice began with night walks, and it's like a long-term, consistent kind of passion of mine is walking at night. So I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting today. The way that we are going to structure the event is that we're going to I'm going to introduce Eléonore properly, and then she's going to do a short presentation around 15 to 20 minutes about her work, about her night walking practice. Then Eléonore and I will have a short conversation drawing out some of the key themes from the work that she's been doing, and then I will open that Q&A out to the room for everybody to join in with. And we estimate that our total running time will be just over an hour, maybe like an hour and 15 minutes, maximum an hour and a half. So just so that you have a sense of where we're going and what the structure is. So Eléonore Ozanne is an artist and researcher. She's based between Seville, Bilbao, and Pau. But at the moment, she's in Mexico. She's dialing in today from Mexico, where she's undertaking fieldwork for her PhD. Her interdisciplinary work examines the relationship between the body and the boundaries of everyday spaces. Through a practice of displacement, she investigates the concept of frontiers, both as physical limits and invisible walls that we navigate in daily life. Using her body as the central medium, she engages in performative actions to traverse, penetrate, or reconfigure these predetermined spaces and times. She's an active member of the research teams Gizatea and Alta, where she contributes to projects exploring notions of precariousness and displacement in a globalized world. Her collaborative research seeks to understand and articulate the nuanced experiences of marginalization and transience. And I'm actually just going to pop a link in the chat to Eléonore's biography on the Walk, Listen, Create site so that you can follow her as well. So Eléonore, I'm going to invite you to make a start with your presentation, if that's okay. Can you share your screen?
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Claire and Andrew. Can you see my screen?
Yes. We can, thank you.
Wonderful. So thank you very much. And I'm thrilled to be here with you today. As Clara mentioned, I work through and with the body on the concept of borders and limits of everyday spaces. And tonight I will talk to you about the project Women Walking the City at Night. Since COVID, and particularly with the lockdown, I couldn't stop thinking about the relationship with the city during the day and during the night, and how do we live the city depending on if we were men or women. I wanted to explore through our body how do we live the city at night, and how is our experience as a woman, and how does the night reshapes our relationship with spaces. And this is how Women Walking the City at Night was born. The idea is very simple. It consists to take a walk at night among women. We meet at a point in a city, and for us to be able to take a real walk, a real drift, we follow the path of the full moon. The first walk took place in September 2021, and it was full of surprises, some of them better than others. And in 2023, I decided to organize it again, but in 3 different cities at the same time. I wrote to everyone that I knew in Spain. And for the full moon of last September, we left finally from 11 different cities. So let me tell you, how did we do it? First, as I said, I wrote to everyone that I knew. Then I usually had a contact with one of the women in each city. We would decide together the starting point, and at the day of the performance, I'd ask them to read a text out loud. I'd like to take a little more moment to talk about the project. So if you agree, I'd love to take you back to the memory of this night, walking through the city, because I'm sure that it will lead us to talk about many different topics in the second part of this cafe. Okay, so please imagine that you are a woman. It is night. You're in the streets, surrounded by other women, some of whom you may know, some of whom you don't, but you're here, and one of them starts to read. Hello. Thank you very much for being here under the harvest moon, the brightest moon of the whole year. We are here to talk about body, but mostly to experiment with the body, to move and see what comes up. Maybe memories, fear, or joy of meeting new friends. Please take the time to listen to yourselves. It is important to tell you that this walk is in itself an experimentation of limits, physical limits of the city, of social construction, but also limits of what you do or not in a group and what you feel. Please keep in mind this walk will be done in group, but it doesn't erase personal limits. If at any time someone wants to lead a walk, it is important to listen and to do so. We are in a performance, but we are also in real life. We also talk about limits when we organize a walk among women. I am nobody to decide who is or not within these limits. Cis, trans, gender, queer, anyone who feels that this proposal has to do with them is welcome to the action. The drift will end when we are only 4 women, when there are only 4 women left, And when we all decide to stop, please, after the walk, if you have any thoughts, memory, or sensations, do not hesitate to send them to me with WhatsApp, audio, photo, email, whatever you consider. This way, perhaps, we will be able to put together a joint story of personal experience of our body walking through the night. Tonight, we will leave in the same direction from different points. We will not make any video call so that we can allow ourselves to be present here and now. But I do propose you to take a picture as a souvenir. Should we start? And we started walking. Some of us take it in a very festive way. Others make the path from an introspection. I feel wrapped by the group with a feeling of fluidity between us. It is as if we were going through currents of air in which we can move back and forth and anchor ourselves close to another body, another conversation, another step. It is strange to feel immediate trust and closeness with women that are completely strangers. They are diverse, different, and I feel safe. I don't even look at other people on the street in case they might be a danger. Well, you never know, maybe get downstairs and I'll kill you. It's true, but I don't know. I'm gonna trust you. As we walk, conversation springs up. Some are about getting to know each other, or flashes of idea about the city, like seeing ducks passing by a river. Invisible division, fear, the night, what it hides, monsters, passion, desire, legend, what we fear from others and of ourselves. Other as a potential danger, other as shelter. Age. When I was young, I remember wanting to be old and ugly so that they would stop overwhelming me with all those stares. Now I feel that the dangers are different, more asexual. For me, it's just that I don't go out so much at night. Women. I believe that men could also participate. Feminism should not discriminate, although it wouldn't be exactly the same thing, of course. Well, to me, the word woman does not seem adequate. Feminized body seems better. Well, but if it was like that, many people won't come, wouldn't they? Woman is the most common word. And if we put woman with an asterisk, and of course, trans person can also experience violence in the streets. I don't know. I think this space has to be a safe place for trans woman, trans person. If it isn't, then I wouldn't be safe either. And can't we trust that whoever feels identified with the action would sign up? How would you have done it? This is an extract of the story built from the testimony that women who participated shared to me. If I'm honest, and although I have a really great time during these walks, I dream of a world in which we won't have to do this walk anymore. But as it is not the case, we would walk together again the night of September 18th at the same time from different parts of Spain, Germany, France, Mexico, United Kingdom, Australia, etc. And if any of you want to join us, please let me know. If there is already an organized walk in your city, I will give you all the information. And if not, we can set up one. The process is simple. You and I would have you would have to define where it would be best to start the action. We don't define the path, but we just define the starting point to avoid being too close to a freeway or another complicated place to cross. Then I will create a series of posters, as you can see on the screen. And we will try to find a minimum of 5 persons who want to walk with us. On the day of the action, I would ask you to read out loud the text that framed the action that I wrote you earlier, and to take a picture before start walking. You will have all the information on the website of Walk, Listen, and Create. But today in this place, I would love us to come back to some of the themes that popped up from the testimonies. So please, would anyone would like to share something about those themes?
Thank you so much, Eléonore. Really lovely to see those images and to hear you talking about this action that, am I right in saying you've done twice before? So the first
Yes.
one in 2021 and then again in last year in 2023.
Exactly.
And there's something that kind of comes out of that for me, which we sort of touched on when we were talking before around the kind of activism within live art or walking art, and the kind of difference between doing something once and making a decision to do it again. And then if there is a kind of rhythm, whether it's an annual thing or a monthly thing or whatever the frequency of the kind of commitment is, there's something that kind of shifts when you decide to make a commitment to repeating the walk or the thing. And I just wanted to kind of ask you about that a little bit to begin with, like what made you decide to do it again, and then what has made you decide to keep going?
Well, there are different, maybe there's never one only answer, but a lot of different strings that were pulled out. I decided to do it again well, first of all, because all the women that participated really asked me to do it again. So when the walk stopped, the most commented theme was, when do we do it again? It was a real reclaim, and so I thought, and I think this is the path, no, between art and activism. When the action just start to enter in our body and in our necessity of reclaiming a space. But I was also very curious of how would be the vivid vivid walks in different spaces. So last year there was a walk in a wood. There was a walk in a very little, almost Iceland, but also in very big cities. And it was very interesting to see that the testimony were really, there was things that were different, obviously, but there was a lot of things, most things were really close testimony, even the context was so different. So I wonder if it will be the same thing in during September 18th. I guess there will be a lot of difference. We will do this in Mexico, here in the city that I am. 10 years ago, you couldn't walk at night, neither being a man or a woman. But I really think that even if we can walk 10 minutes during the night, these are 10 minutes of artistic and activist reclaiming.
Amazing. I wanted also to ask you, I mean, some of the terms that you have up here, some of these kind of words on this final slide, and if you want to, maybe we can stop sharing and then everybody can see you a bit better. I don't know, what do you think? I've got the word,
yes, of course,
captured, but we can come back to them too if we need to look at them. But I wanted to ask you a bit about flow, because one question that popped into my head is that I'm not sure I know how to follow the path of the moon. Just to say too, I have said to Eléonore that I will lead a walk in London on September the 18th. So I think I'm going to need to know how to follow the path of the moon. But that was also, so the word flow was also kind of making me wonder how you think about flow in relation to this type of walking, where there isn't a destination or a purpose to the walk other than the experience of the walk. And I was also struck by what you said about groups of people kind of talking or not talking, and maybe how that changes or connects with the flow, or the sense of flow through a space. Whether, I know sometimes if I get very engrossed in a conversation with somebody, I'm not paying quite so much attention to the things around me, and that can be very beautiful and a very kind of contained space. But yeah, anyway, some thoughts there, to lots of questions within that.
Yes, you've touched the two way that I understand the word flow. The first one is, well, one of them is that we usually walk, but when we walk, we usually look where we're going to go, no? And then suddenly changing the perspective, we don't look so often in the sky to be able to manage the city. First, because it's not really practical, because our city was not built, no, our spaces were not built that way. Even if a long time ago, I guess that we certainly looked at the stars to find our ways, but not anymore. So it changes completely the perspective of the city, and suddenly we start to discover different things. First, a lot of person didn't know where did the moon would go out, and then suddenly all the big blocks of how do you say houses, very tall houses, are becoming very aggressive, because you can't see where you want to go, no? So it's a poetic way of drifting into the city, but it is also a way to discover the place that we inhabitate in a very different way. But the other way of that I understand the flow into the action is how you how you mentioned it, Claire, that when you're walking, there is a flow that is happening. Most of the person that gathered this night didn't know each other, except from one city that it was a consolidated group, but otherwise there was a lot of people that didn't know each other, and the path walk, the rhythm, and the fact that we have to look to something that is completely illogical into the normal logical of our city, helps us to talk about a little bit everything. If we feel that we have to start talking about a very basic small talk, it is possible. But then suddenly we are doing an action and an artistic and activist action. And so we really quickly can drift into very strong conversation. And sometimes it's wonderful, but some other time, as you say, you just want to look at the moon and be with yourself and remember or just feel things. And walk is really good for that, because you can just slowly start to walk slowly or faster, and there's no problem. The flow just helps you to manage this situation.
Thank you. Yeah, that's lovely. And I think there's lots of different flows there that we could think of the movement of the moon as a flow, as well as the movement of our bodies and our breath and the way that we're moving through the city, which in itself has its own flows too. The other term that really struck me in your slide was festivity, and something that I really remember feeling when I first started making kind of group night walks and taking people to these really sort of unusual parts of the city, places where I would think most people would not normally feel comfortable to be at night, was a kind of sense of, there's a kind of combined sense of excitement and kind of nervousness that becomes quite festive, quite exciting and out of the ordinary. And although I really share your desire for a world where it isn't necessary to walk like this to sort of push back against fear, I also kind of hope or imagine a utopia in which things like women walking together under the full moon at night becomes a kind of festive ritual that's not to push away violence or fear, but to celebrate and create I don't know, actions and experiences together that are outside of the boundaries of consumer culture, I suppose.
It's very interesting, because in our first walk in Seville, it was very experimental, and we had some disagreement with some group of men that were not acting well, and suddenly it was changed, because a lot of women asked me to go in a bar, like if being in an accepted place for festivity was more accepted than walking at night. No, and when you're at night, it is logical for you to go in a bar. It is not logical for you to go follow a little bit further. No, yeah. So I could really quickly feel that the excitement of the festivity also was really linked with a kind of fear, and the next year it was the same. The moments of festivity that were related to me were like a lot of children doing, like if there were wolves, no, like terror, but it was a very funny way of being feeling free, you know, to be able to scream like if you were a wolf. So there is, I think that it is important to be able to be into a festivity when you do something that you don't know what you're going to do. And this excitement is really important. And then I could also feel a very particular excitement that I guess that a lot of you that are present have felt, is when we suddenly go a little bit outside of the city, and suddenly you don't really know why, but time just suspends. And normally there's like a strong relationship with nature or with an abandoned place, or and then suddenly you feel like free. You feel out of danger. It's like you've just passed the danger, and now you've just understood that it's okay. We're doing it really, and this is beautiful. And there is a very special kind of festivity. Like everybody saying, "Oh, I would never have gone here, but it's wonderful," and just start to talk about happy things.
So there's a kind of moment there of catharsis, maybe, or a kind of catalyst that shifts the sense of feeling, I wonder. And so maybe that's got two links for me into two of those kind of keywords from your slide. One of which was monsters, and was one, am I imagining this, was one liminal or edges? I've put them in another file now. Let me see if I can get them back up again. But maybe we could begin with monsters.
It was all these words came from the direct testimony of different persons in the group in which I was. We didn't talk so much about it, although it is interesting to be able to open. I think that the fact that it is an artistic action, as well as activist, is that everybody feels free, or I really try to be able for everybody to feel free to talk about what they are feeling or what they interpret on this action. So there is a lot of women that see the full moon, for example, in a very esoteric way, and talking about legends and monsters and fears, things that we used to talk with, maybe with our parents when they used to read some cuentos,
some fairy
stories.
tales.
Yes, some fairy tales
yeah.
before going to bed, no? And suddenly we're not in bed. We are walking, and maybe something magical is going to happen, or maybe something magical is going to be imagined, no? But I am not sure about the specific way of interpreting a monster that the person that told me this word was, but I like it to be very open.
I think too, in the research that I've done, which is not by any means super extensive around fear and walking at night, and I think this does have a relationship to the idea of monsters, is that in the UK, at least, I should be specific about my categorizing. The fear of violence, for example, around walking at night by women is quite disproportionate to the actual statistics around violence, gender-based violence at night. Gender-based violence is much more likely to occur in the home or in relation to people who are already known to you, and yet the dominance of the fear is really huge. So there's a very interesting kind of monster, I would say, in terms of that fear and its relationship to reality that really horribly restricts people's lives. And I think part of that too is caught up in media discourses that are very much victim blaming, that you know, when horrific crimes are committed, pose questions like what was she wearing, or what was she doing out at night, or why was she walking, that completely skew the perspectives of crime and kind of victim blaming in a really tricky way. And I think that does make monsters for people. So the other term I wanted to draw on, and then we'll move to questions from the room. Thank you everybody for your patience, and I hope you're kind of gathering some questions together as we talk. I'm really excited to open it out because I know there's lots of walkers in the room. Was about limits. And so you talked about this sort of sense of a moment when you cross, and perhaps it's when you reach this kind of city limits of what feels like the city center, or the kind of more ordinary spaces where you might be walking, and beyond that things feel more unusual, and people start to say things like, I would never have walked here by myself. Quite often they're places where people would never have any reason to go at night or day because they're quite unusual spaces, light industrial or suburban places. And I wondered something there maybe about the kind of possibility of pushing limits collectively that has a real kind of power and potential. And I know the sort of popularization of psychogeography, and again in the UK, like the Ramblers, who are very well known kind of walking organization, now have inner city groups who do urban walks, and you know, there's a lot more walking of unusual spaces than there used to be. But I still think there's something there around limits, and I wonder if that's to do with the time of night as well. And maybe that's one more question. Sorry, I'm packing all of my questions in, stacking them up rather. Is how long do the walks tend to go on for? You say that until nobody wants to continue on, or there's only 4 people left, that's when the walk is over. But does that go quite late into the night? You start at 9 p.m.
So I'll start. I'll start with the last question. It really depends on the context. As I said earlier, in a small island, you cannot, like, it was in Cadiz, for example, you can only walk 14 minutes from a place to another. So
Okay.
we started near the beach, and they ended near the beach. In the wood, well, it also depended on what they were able to do. It is easier to walk longer in cities because of different factors. The first one is that normally there is usually 1 or 2 person that more or less know the area on a day basis, or in a driving basis, not so much walking. But if we are in a place and we're going towards another place, and one of us live in this place, then fears just is going a little bit down. But it does talk about limits, because there are really different limits. There are true architectural limits, where you arrive and you see a freeway and you say, okay, I cannot pass over there. I think we are already walking and working with certain degree of fear and danger, but the freeway is not the objective. Or dangerous places to go without light and with cars going really fast. So there are places that you cannot go. But there are also our personal limits when you are going into this walk with a little children.
Yeah.
Whenever fears become too strong, for me, it was really important to the text of the beginning was really important, because it is important to listen to ourselves. It's not, the objective is not to well, is not to force anybody. No, we have to, and I could really feel that in the first walk, there was this tension between, oh, should I listen more to the group or should I listen to myself? And I feel that it is a political position for me to say, no, we are all individual and we are all going to go into a same direction, but it is important to listen to ourselves. And then there was another very interesting thing for me. That was that a lot of time the going back to your house was conditioning how far you were going to go.
Okay.
Because if we meet in a place and you live over there and we are going over there,
Yeah,
and it is 3 o'clock in the morning suddenly, and maybe we will not be able to find somebody to help you to go back over there. Well, a lot of time this is a very big condition for you to quit the performance a little bit earlier to go back to your house.
yeah.
And if we think about it, it is something that happens to us every day, no? So yes, I think the artistic walk helps us also to have a different look on our daily practice.
So many kind of really rich elements there, Eléonore, and lots of things that maybe in future we'll have chance to talk about, but perhaps there isn't enough time this evening about like the histories of women doing Reclaim the Night marches, or you know, there's so much kind of super rich sort of context that we could go into, but I am a little bit conscious of the time and I really want to open up questions to the room and ask, I wonder actually, shall we pose a question to the room first? So if that's a good way to begin. So I know there are a lot of people here who walk and who are walking artists, and I wonder if anybody here would like to share their reflections or resonances of Eléonore's walking with their practice. And if you want to, if you prefer, you can write your question in the chat and I will read it out for you. Or if you would like, you could put your hand up and I can call on you and you can turn your mic on and say your question out loud, as you prefer. Oh, I can see there's one question in the chat already from Joe, who says, sadly, I'm going to have to leave, but I wonder what ideas you have for alternatives to following the moon if, as is very likely in late September in the UK, it's a cloudy night.
Yes, it already happened. This is why for me it is important. I didn't answer to this question. Why did I do it once a year? But the fact that it is in September is also for because it's more likely to be not so cloudy. But if it is cloudy, there are two alternatives, or staying still and just walk really slowly, or staying still, or I will give you the uh, the how do you say north, south, east, west? The
Compass?
compass of
Mm.
where is going the moon, and
Yes.
so
Oh, the
you would
direction,
be,
yeah, to follow.
yes, you would be able to go cardinal direction. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anne.
Okay, come on, somebody must like to speak here. I know there are. I know.
Melanie wanted to.
Melanie. Oh, great. Melanie has her hand up. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eléonore. I would very much like to lead a group of this I live in Western Massachusetts. I live in a very rural part of the state, and I've been leading a group of women to water. We walk to water once a month, and we immerse in the water, and we have conversation about it. And one of the conversations was about fear, and I was just thinking about, coyotes and being in the woods at night or during the day, and the fear of that. But the number one thing that the different women in this group talked about was fear of men, and that is the number one thing that prevents them from doing any kind of walking. And so what you're talking about here, like that piece of like reclaiming and pushing back against that, really resonates with me. The other thing that we talked largely about was this idea of a sixth sense. So that thing of, and I think you're talking about it too, this thing of when you feel like, okay, it's time for me to stop, or I sense something, it's time. And to really, like, the thing that came up, and it's come up for me, it's happened to me in my life, where when I haven't listened to that sixth sense, that's when I've gotten into trouble, or that's when something happened. And it was sort of uncanny how almost every single one of the women at this conversation, I think there were 6 of us, had something to say about that to trust yourself, to trust those feelings. And sometimes they feel so weird, but I really, everything you're saying really resonates with me, and I really appreciate this whole conversation. And I look forward to, I guess my question, if I have one, is I mean, we can't really walk simultaneously because 9 p.m. is different everywhere. Right? So like it is 9 p.m. That's
Yes.
the starting time, really, regardless of your time zone, right?
Yes, this is it.
Great.
Because if not, some of us would be on daylight.
Right.
So the most important is like 9 p.m. And in my imaginary biggest wish, I would love it to end up being maybe like a 24 hours walking. No?
Well,
That could be. That's great. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
very much.
Melanie. And Eleanor's going to share a thing just at the end again about how you can contact her if you would like to coordinate a walk in your location. Would anybody else like to ask? I can only see your actual real physical hands for 12 people on the screen at a time, just because of the way my browser deals with Zoom. Anne, did you want to ask something?
I just want to, make a comment. I think it's so exciting, and I think we're going to I have a friend, Carol, is on here, who lives near me, and we're talking about how to do this here in Philadelphia area. So it's, I mean, ever since I saw Eleanor's presentation in Girona, I've been thinking about it. So I'm so happy that it's here as a reminder right now. It's So the one thing that you didn't mention that I remember from your presentation before that's really important about the September moon is that it's the harvest moon. And that's a special moon, and it already has sort of ritualistic and seasonal rhythmic connotations that reverberations that go way back into cycle. So there's something about connecting with these cycles that humans have always been aware of, and connecting with the harvest moon, especially. I think I just see it poetically as something that we're harvesting ourselves or our potential, or there are different ways. But I was curious, I wanted you to talk a little bit about that and the choosing of the harvest moon.
Hi, thank you, Anne. Yes, the harvest moon was. I've chosen this moon for different reasons. The first one is because it is normally in a normal year. This year was a little special because of the last blue moon. But normally it is the moment where the moon is very near to the Earth. And so it is the brightest moon. Normally, it is the brightest moon of the year. It is also for a lot of countries a good moment because it is between seasons, and so normally it is easier to have not to have so much rain, even if we are at north or at south of the Earth. And for me personally, like I've chosen the moon in general for practical reason, for poetical reason, and for an historical reason too. During the harvest moon was the moon the more cherished by how do you say the person that are working countryside. I don't know how you say peasant, but well, because it was the only moon where they were able to work at night. So it is a moon that is that has it is a moment that has been with us and with our practice of being outside at night since a lot of generation. So for me it was important. But as I say, this is my personal interpretation, and I love to share it. But for me, it is important that everybody that is walking feel free to share their interpretation for the project to be of all of us. No, there are a lot of women that feel that this moon is a very esoterical significance of how we are being women, etc. I don't feel it so much personally, but I love other person to feel it that way.
Thanks so much, Eléonore. And I can see Alexandra and then Amanda have questions, but I just want to touch on Dee's kind of question in the chat first around the idea that there should be a network joining these kind of projects. And that's immediately what strikes me too. Like I mentioned, some of the research that I've been doing over the last, 20 years really, is, bubbling up again for me. And I've been doing some interviews with people using walking in their creative practice, mostly in Europe at the moment, because I'm working within the range of my own travel anyway. But there are so many interesting practices, and Dee's mentioned Women Walk at Midnight in Delhi and Why Loiter in Mumbai, and there's also the Mara Collective in India who've done some amazing night walks that are based around smell, and there's just some very yeah, very exciting. And I'm thinking too of Yanis, who's on the call here as well, who's doing amazing work on night walking, and Elisa, who's on the call as well. And I know that Marlene, who's on the call too, has also been doing some work around night walking in forests, and Claire Hind, who's not here today, doing amazing women walking at night in rural environments. So that it just feels like it's like a really potent moment, maybe, and perhaps like we can think about some of the energy here in this room if people want to get in touch with me and with Eléonore. Like we could think about how we might coordinate and keep that energy kind of moving around doing something together. But oh, and Ellie's doing a night walking project at Bristol right now. This is, yeah, it's super exciting. So, but let's, because I'm also got one eye on the time, let's move to Alexandra to ask your question.
Yeah, so this is a question maybe mainly for Eléonore, but if other people have thoughts about it, since, as you said, there are many people who are interested in doing night walks right now in the meeting. One thing I've just noticed myself personally, although I've never really talked about this with many people or even read about other people discussing this issue, is how we as women project ourselves as we walk, especially in places where we're not comfortable in the city. And this was something I learned on my own independently when I was quite young and I was traveling either with just a friend or on my own. I, like many other women, would be hassled in various ways quite a bit. And then at some point in time, I decided to change how just my inner projection of myself towards the urban environment. And I sort of created on my own a much more, aggressive and don't mess with me kind of projection. It didn't necessarily come into how I was looking at, it must have affected how I was looking at people. Well, I think it was more about body language. And after I created that new outward projection, the number of encounters I have basically was cut in half or more. But as I said, I've never actually heard this discussed, other people doing it or talking about it. And but I think it might have to be something other people talk about or discuss. And I'd love to hear about that.
I think that Ellie wants to answer now.
So I've been running drama workshops with women and they say exactly the same thing, Alexandra. They talk about having a night walk and they talk about masculinizing themselves at night, the way that they walk, the clothes that they wear, the sort of the amount of space they take up. I think it's really interesting that we almost, divest ourselves of gender or regender ourselves at night in order to cope with the night. So yeah, that is a very common thing that women are saying, actually.
For me personally, I really wanted to do this action for us to not to have to change, to make this effort, to change our compartment, to be able to feel free of walking at night. So I feel that the fact that we gather, that we come all together, helps us to feel free and to also see how other women does it, and there's in the performance a lot of persons start to talk about their way of living and embody the city at night. So it is a common posture, but me personally, I want to advocate for us to be free, not to change our way of walking, and for all the city to normalize our presence in these places.
Thanks so much. Really lovely to hear some of these threads and resonances coming through. Amanda, you have a question as well.
Yes, thank you. Well, I see this theme of fear and safety on the streets keeps coming back. It's not surprising. I want to share something really quickly. I'm originally from Brazil, but I live in Britain, and I haven't lived in Brazil for almost 20 years now. And I got interested in walking art, and began a walking art practice myself when already here in Britain. So I can't speak to that in Brazil, but there, of course, differently from here, violence is a much more real problem that you face, that, as you, Eléonore, touched on there in Mexico, how the place where you are now, I'm not sure what city that is, it's dangerous for or was until recently, for both men and women to walk on the streets at night. And yeah, so in Brazil, I didn't walk at night on the streets, much less by myself. Whereas here in Britain, I remember if there was like I can pinpoint the moment when I realized I was actually able to do that. And since I have always walked the streets, I had it was a Christmas night. I lived in London for many years, and a friend of mine said, I was just, spending Christmas with this one friend, and he was like, "Oh, let's go up Parliament Hill in Hampstead Heath." And I was like, "No, are you crazy? It's like dark, with those fears of walking at night in some kind of empty space that I brought with me from Brazil." And he was like, "No, let's go." And so we went. And when we got to the park, we were, in this kind of really dark areas. And I was trembling, like really saying, "No, I don't think I want to do this." He was like, "No, it's fine. It's fine." I got over my fear, and we did go up the hill. And when we got there were like families, little children, and everybody, "Hey, Merry Christmas!" And then I was like, "Oh my God, I really didn't need to be so afraid. This is, really nice." It was actually really nice, and I'm really glad I did get over my fear, and didn't listen to my sixth sense, but in this case, it led to a very pleasant experience and brought down this kind of wall of fear that I felt I was, leaving behind. And since I've made, a habit out of walking at night, and I walk at night by myself, I feel like it is a political act, maybe, reclaiming this space on the streets. But that is only because, like Claire mentioned, it is, statistically pretty okay to do that here. I don't know if I would do that if I were somewhere else where violence is a real and, present threat. But my question has nothing to do with this. Sorry, I just wanted to share this little story. My question is to do with the. I want to know, how do you, Eléonore, frame this? Women walking, following the moon at night. How do you frame that as an artwork? Because someone in the chat, Dawn, said that they do something similar every year, but it's not art, it's just an activism initiative. And I have recently written a dissertation on walking scores and how to frame that as art objects. So I want to know, how do you frame your initiative as, a work of art?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your testimony and for the question. Just I before I answer to your question, I wanted to come back to this question of fear, because I feel that several times we started to say, yeah, it's a fear that we have in us, like if it was our fault. Well, I know that it wasn't said like that, but like if we could take it off. But I wanted to share one of the experience that happened in one of our paths. In the moment that I was reading the little text to frame the action, in one of the paths, three groups of men passed by and started to tell us things, no? A lot of things, and we didn't we hadn't started to walk yet, and yet there was already something or some person that were mentioning that we did not, our body and our person did not wasn't normal in this space and time. So I think it is not only a personal construction, personal gender construction, but all a very established organization that makes us having this feeling, from the words of my mother telling me, be careful, to my fears, to the thing that I've seen on the television, but also from the comportment of person that are outside. And this leads me to the fact that some in some context things are in a way, and in some other context things are another way. When I arrived here, I'm in Jalapa. It is very near Veracruz. Veracruz is the biggest port of Mexico, no? So there's a lot of money and a lot of different things going out there. And the first time I get out night, I wasn't afraid at all. But the person that was near waiting for me at home was terrified, and so I felt, okay, maybe my sixth sense is not developed for this context. No, so each context is very it is difficult not to be judged. Oh, well, yeah, to judge the situation correctly when you don't know it. And your question was about
framing your work as a work of art.
Of a work of art. Sorry. Well, I don't know how it is in the place that you are all living, but I am living in Spain, and in Spain, 2 years ago, we had a very, very, very hard and big debate on gender, because of the approval of a transgender law that opened a lot of freedom, and I personally agree. But suddenly, feminism groups started to be very, very stuck and confronted. And at a point, sorry, there's a mosquito. At a point that it was very stressful to start to talk about feminism practices, but very, very stressful when you were just having a beer in a bar, and when question of gender or feminism started to pop up, everybody was just very tense and starting to look at each other to see if we could talk, if we're going to have like attacks, or what was going to happen. And for me, the fact that suddenly everybody muted for us not to fight was so hard, because I think we have to talk about things, and this is I think the thing that I prefer of our walks, of a woman walking the city at night, is that the fact that we are walking towards a poetic and completely illogical destination. For me, the poetic gives the artistic facts and permits us just to be, not us, like our body claims for us, our presence claimed for us, and the artistic practice helps us to revindicate the fact that we are able, we want to be able to walk at night. But of course there is an activism part in this project, but there's a lot of other things, and the poetic and artistic way of seeing it, I think it helps to be more inclusive for all ages and all ideology, and it helps us to get out of the established frame of where we are able to talk about feminism, where we are about to talk about who is woman, who is not, where we are able to talk about it helps just to flow a little bit more.
Thanks so much, Eléonore. I'm going to start to draw us to a close. And I wondered, actually, just to sort of chime in there, I think it's I can't think of her name right now, but there's an Australian artist academic who talks about art giving you permission to do things outside of the ordinary, and that art can function as a mode of invitation that's gentler to some people who might not see themselves as activists, but are curious to participate in slightly newer or challenging things. At some point, I'll remember her name. But what I want to ask you to do before we close is just to repeat the kind of call out if anybody would like to host a walk. What do they need to do?
So please write to me. I'll put my email address on the chat, but you can also find all the information on the Walk, Listen, Create and on my website. And we would see where it is better to start and see how to do it, to find for other women to walk side by you, and that's all. The day of the action, I would ask you to read the text. It would be actualized with all the city where we will walk through, and to take a photo of the group. This would be the way of organizing one of the action in your city. Said like that, it looks like a lot, but I think it's not so much, because it's really collaborative, and the idea is not to make a touristic path. It's just to gather and walk together and discover other person, other way of walking the city, other bodies, other experiences of our city.
Thank you so much, Eléonore, and thank you everybody for coming and for sharing your thoughts and your ideas. I think Andrew's already clocked that the chat is a really lovely, rich space of kind of references and shared points that people have written there. So so you can save that yourself if you want to kind of click and copy it now, but I think Andrew will also save it as part of the kind of record of the cafe that will go up onto their website. Andrew, is there anything else that you would like to say just before we say good night or good day, depending on where you are in the world?
Well, I'd just like to thank you and Eléonore for fantastic event. It's been really successful. It drew a good crowd of people, and there've been some really interesting conversations, and I think they're going to travel forward, which is fantastic. And a big plug, I suppose, to the EU for making it all possible. So there we go.